Welcome to the Are You Awesome Today podcast. I am your host, Stephen Shaner, and you are invited to join us weekly as we talk with successful people who will share with us their personal and professional experiences that have taken them from great to awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Are You Awesome Today podcast. I am your host, Stephen Shaner, the Attitude Chiropractor. Joining us today is Janet Polach. She is an executive coach. She is a speaker. She is an expert in developing new executives. She is author of the book, The 7 Mistakes Managers Make. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Janet, welcome to the podcast. Are you awesome today?
Oh, I am awesome. And thank you, Stephen, for having me. This is such a great opportunity and a great way to focus on leadership and success, because after all, it's all about the people that we interact with day to day.
That's so very true. Thank you for saying it that way. I love that. Let's start off. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you gained this passion for helping people be better executives.
I graduated from college with a degree in education. And unbeknownst to me, when I was 21 years old, there was a recession going on. Teaching jobs were hard to come by because schools were eliminating positions. And so I had these unusual jobs in all sorts of outstate places, including a place called Faith, South Dakota. And when I interviewed with the superintendent of schools, he said, first of all, you have to know where we are. We're 100 miles from North Dakota and 100 miles from Wyoming. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'll be an old maid forever. So I started looking at other opportunities, and the Marine Corps recruiter just kind of clicked with me. I looked at all 4 services. My mother was a high school teacher, and she came home from her job one day, and she said, well, the recruiters were in school today. Janet, have you thought about that? I looked at all the services, and the Marines just kind of won out. That's where I gained my perspective about what does great leadership look like. The United States Marine Corps, as all the services do, spend a lot of time defining leadership, teaching how you do it, not only as a brand new recruit, but as a first lieutenant and as a captain and as a major and so on up the rank. They define and they expand on what does good leadership look like. So that gave me the underpinnings. Left active duty, ended up staying in the reserves for a lot of years. Through that time, then worked for some government contractors where that leadership know-how and experience made good sense. And then eventually went out on my own as a consultant. And so I focus now on leadership development, executive development, and like you said, brand new frontline managers. How do they be successful in what they do? Because we don't teach them how to do that before they get the job. Unlike in the Marine Corps, people are promoted because they were great individual contributors. And you say, ta-da, now you get to be a manager. And it's very clear, there's a lot of research that's been done that most managers feel that they are failing in the first 2 years of their first management role.
It's amazing, too. I've seen this quite frequently where somebody is taken from the front lines, promoted into management, and within a year and a half, they said, this isn't for me. So they really didn't know what the position was about and what the requirements were and what have you. And they end up, bailing on the manager position, going back into some.
Yeah. If you think, Stephen, about I'm just going to build on that. So if you think about a Venn diagram, great individual contributor skills are on the one side, getting things done, planning, executing, telling the boss what they're working on, developing themselves. On the other side is management. So it's planning for others. It is communicating to senior leadership. It's about developing your team. And so those overlapping skills are a very, very narrow slice. And I think that's fundamentally why so many managers, after a couple of years, say, wow, this isn't what I bargained for.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, most definitely. I got my leadership start in the military as well. Right out of high school, I went in the Army. They promoted me to E3 day one. First day in basic, I jumped a rank. I jumped up 2 ranks, went to E3, private first class, and graduated from boot camp. Went to the Navy School of Music, even though I was in the Army, and graduated from there, got to my Army band, and a couple months after that, they jumped me up another rank up to E5. So I went in as E3, went up to E5, and And you're so true. Everything is so well defined for those positions. As a sergeant, there were certain skills that I needed to develop, and they trained me and taught me how to do those things. So excellent, excellent.
Mhm.
I I like to tell people the difference between leadership and management is you should manage your processes and your machines, and you should lead your people.
Hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, that's a very good perspective about it. And I think oftentimes, again, back to that individual contributor to manager, they're comfortable with the processes. They know, they're often promoted because they're good technical experts in what they do. And so the challenge when you get to that management rank is picking up that people stuff as well. Organizations, have different names for managers and leaders. Sometimes it's even the same role.
Mhm.
I really love when I talk about this as people leadership, because, my book doesn't really talk about how do you do process design or how do you do source analysis on what the issue is. It really focuses on how you give great feedback. How do you develop your team? How do you manage change, this constant array of change? How do you have good one-on-one meetings with your team member on a regular basis? I think about leadership as a little bit more strategic than that management blocking and tackling. Strategic leadership is about, connecting your peers together. So other managers, other leaders together, really linking what the work of your team is against the overall strategic mission and goals of the organization. And then, of course, communicating very broadly and thinking about all the stakeholders that are involved, not just my team.
Okay, 7 mistakes. Let's talk about the
Mhm.
7 mistakes managers make. I'm
Yeah.
sure I've been guilty of all these and another seven on top of that. So.
So, Stephen, people often say 7 mistakes, only 7 mistakes. I bet I did 152. But, nobody wants to read a book called 152 Mistakes You Make as a Manager. So, I think in my experience as an executive coach, these are the ones that I seem to trip over and over again. I have a day and a half training program that goes with the book or that can be, separate from the book. And I've run actually directors through the program as well. And they're like, oh, Janet, I forgot I was supposed to do some of this stuff. I forgot about the importance of one-on-ones because I talk to my people every single day about what they're working on. Well, do you talk about what they're learning? Do you talk about what challenges you can help them move? Do you talk about what are their career aspirations? And so often when I talk to either managers or leaders, they say no to those questions. So I think a fundamental challenge for a new manager is doing instead of leading. That you're so used to doing the work, you can probably do it faster. You will have it done exactly the way you want. And yet then your team members sit around and say, what are we here for? You're underutilizing them and you're underutilizing yourself when you are doing and not leading because you're promoted to do a broader role. And if you just jump back into that micromanagement and doing it for people, there's a two-way stickness, right? Stuckness that both from the employee and from the manager.
Yeah, and you're not giving them the opportunity to learn and grow and use their skills as well.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
What's next is not developing your team. So often managers say to me, well, I sent them to a class. And what we know from adult learning is that the most ineffective way for people to learn is to go off to a class. Why? Because they're learning with a whole bunch of other people from other organizations, and we don't exactly do it that way here. Now, there is great value to networking and going to a class outside of your organization because you get to hear how other organizations do it, you generate ideas, you develop a network. But to really learn new skills and apply them on the job is thinking about how do you learn them right on the job. So shadowing another person, sharing skills during a team meeting, identifying who does this really, really well, and then observing them are all ways that you can really develop your team right in the line of work that they're doing.
Okay. So true. So many times one of my employees would come in and say, oh, we got this little challenge or this problem, expecting me to say, okay, here's how you fix it. And in some
Mhm.
cases, yeah, I could do that. We were computer programmers, so yeah, I could do that. But rather, I would say, okay, go back to your desk, come back with three pop-solve solutions. And they'd come back a little
Nice.
while later and say, okay, here's one, here's one, here's one. Okay, what's the pros and cons of each? Okay, and they'd go through that. All right, if it was your choice, what would you do? And they say, well, I think I'd choose option two. Why? Here, okay, have you thought about this? If there was anything like that,
Mhm.
go. And they may make the wrong decision, but
Mhm.
they'll learn more from that than me telling them what to do all the time. And I think that's key to
Absolutely.
helping other people, develop. And it got to the point where they just wouldn't even come to me. They would figure it out, make the change, then come tell me, here's what happened, here's what I did. And it's not going to happen
Right.
again. Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's how we develop more leaders, I think. So I love how you not developing your team. And it's so true. It's so easy just to do it or give them the answer,
Mhm.
here, go do it this way. And guess what? A lot of times they had a better solution than what I would have come up with. Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I love this. All right, next.
Failure to take time to give and receive feedback. We think so often as leaders that, well, if I give them feedback, I will negatively impact a relationship because who wants to be told what they did wrong? When people mess up, whether it's not on time in a report or there's errors in the report or it just wasn't broad enough as the leader had hoped, individuals often know that they messed up. And the last thing they need to be done is their boss, who matters in their life, to say, you did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. Instead, I suggest that you talk about what you did, talk about the impact that it had on other people. I spent the rest of my day, the report was wrong, and I spent the rest of my day on the phone with the executives trying to sort out the numbers, and then talk about next time. How do we not have this happen next time? And I think that's such a productive conversation instead of saying, well, you did this and you screwed up and I was embarrassed. Well, I was embarrassed too. So that doesn't get us anywhere. So good
Sure.
feedback is forward-looking feedback.
Mhm.
I also talk about in that chapter about constantly scanning the environment for feedback on your own behaviors and skills and performance. A lot of people don't do this. They are uncomfortable doing it. They think asking someone for feedback, they'll only hear accolades. Well, if you send them a little bit of heads up saying, I'm doing this for my growth and development, I'd love to know what I'm doing well. And then if there's a couple of development areas for me, once people have that chance, they will be very honest because they care about you. They work with you regularly.
Yeah.
They are invested in your success, whether they're have a reporting relationship or not.
Too frequently, it doesn't happen until the annual performance review. And
Mhm.
I'm one that in an annual performance review, there should never be any surprises, for
Mhm.
bad. So these should be conversations that happen continuously all the time and not wait for the end of the year and that type of stuff. So very
Yeah.
nice. Okay, what's up next?
What's up next? So, how about sticking with the status quo? There's a really great chapter in the book about innovation and innovation tools. So often a manager, a leader will say to me, but I'm not creative. And that may be. They have lots of other skills that are very detail oriented and fact based and so forth. As a leader, you don't have to be the innovation lead person. You have to be able to bring together a group and create breakthrough ideas collectively. Because the best breakthrough ideas come when, Stephen, you say something, then I add on, and then Sharon adds on to that, and somebody else summarizes and gets it all wrong, but still has a breakthrough idea. Leaders really need to be focused on how do I create innovation conversations? What we also know about innovation is that it can't happen. It really can't happen within the flow of work. It can't happen at a team meeting where you're doing operational discussions and then suddenly you say, let's shift now to innovation. Our human brain is just not that equipped to do that switch. But instead, if you meet, weekly as a team, so maybe once a month, you spend that team time on innovation. And the book has, 10, 12, 15 techniques that I've learned over the years on how to create an environment, how to create a meeting where you actually you come up with innovative ideas. and you can abandon that brainstorming on a flip chart and write down everybody's ideas.
Yeah. Innovation is fun. Just did an opening keynote at a conference this past weekend down in Chattanooga, and my topic was a whack on the side of the head and about innovation and creativity. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, A Whack on the Side of the Head, but yeah, so fun stuff. So it was fun. Yeah, innovation. Oh, yeah, too often we've always done it this way. So,
Yeah.
all right. Next.
So next is not developing your power. So knowing as a manager or leader that you have the ability to influence. After all, the resources really aren't yours, they're the organization's. If you need another headcount, if you need more money for software or for an enhancement in something, the way you get that is influencing. You understand what the other person values and needs, and then figure out how what you're asking for will serve them as well. That's the best strategy for influencing, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes, not let me convince you what I need. It sounds like a very simple nuance, but it really is much more dramatic than that.
Very nice. Okay, next one.
Planning and execution. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to execute. And I hear this from managers, and I hear it from senior leaders, executives as well, is they maybe get promoted into an existing team. So, they shuffled everybody around. And so this team has been working together for 4 or 5 years, and now I'm the manager. It's so often in this busy way that we are in organizations these days to just keep going. And yet it's really critical to pause and say, all right, here's what this organization was doing before. Now, what are we expected to do in the next year? And who's going to be working on that? It's also a chance as a new leader to reorganize the team a little bit, to find out what people really love to do. Maybe I'm really good at doing the monthly report, but I found it tedious. I've been doing it for the last 3 years, and oh my gosh, if I have to do it again, I'm going to shoot myself. And here's somebody else that might really want that opportunity because they believe their skills are there. It's very much about establishing what the team expectations are, and then establishing what each individual is responsible for, even if it's a long-term existing team.
All right, what else you got?
What else do I have? I think the last one is not getting ahead of change. Leaders, managers, employees also always fuss that, well, they did it to us, whether it's HR or the executives or whatever. And yet implementing change is really at the local level. And so I provide a number of tools and questions for you as the manager or leader to think through, how do I create a WIFM? What's in it for them? How do I communicate not only what's changing, but what's not changing? That's really important. How do I assess who my stakeholders are, and how do I have to get them on board? And then creating a plan to move your group that you're responsible through the change. And you can do these techniques whether it's a change foisted upon you. We're going to a 4-day work week, for example, or something, maybe it's a process change that you've put in place for your team because it will create an efficiency. Well, just saying that process, here's the new process, now go do it, isn't going to stick. Using some of the tools in the book to help you think about, how do I get my team ready for this change and understand this change, and then be ready to do it.
Change. Change is good. You go first.
Exactly.
It's a great book title by Tom Feltenstein and Mac Anderson. Change is good. Okay. You go first. Fun. I love change, and I've always been that way. It's just I feel that change brings opportunities that you wouldn't have had, and it's been so true all the time.
Let me just say one more thing about change. That when I work with organizations on change, and I often teach a change management, workshop, I think the most surprising thing to the learners is stakeholder management. So I'm a manager and I have my team members, and I think that's my stakeholders. Well, even if you're implementing a process right within your own team, there's an input and an output that's going to impact somebody else. So those teams, people also are stakeholders. Your boss is a stakeholder. Maybe there's some external customers that need to know about this. So I think taking time to really define who are stakeholders, how are they going to be impacted by this change, I think is a key thing that leaders often overlook.
I love the way you mentioned, communicating not only what's changing, but what's not changing. And that step, I know I've missed that on quite a few occasions. So that's a very good point. Now you are working on a second book. Tell us a little bit about that.
I am working on a second book. So the first book was done during COVID because, that's what we did. We learned how to bake bread, or we wrote a book, and I had some time to do it. So that was good. And the second book then was percolating with me. The working title right now is The Strategic Leader Adopting the Mindset for Success. There are many, many books, countless books that have been written about executive presence and competencies to be an executive. Very few have talked about how is that transition from senior manager to executive, and how do you need to think differently? How do you need to think about more thinking and less doing? How do you integrate your actions with the rest of the enterprise? How do you take more decisive people actions so that when there is a substandard performer on the team, you either help them get righted or you help them get exited? And so all of these things, I believe, I found require us to think a little bit differently as executives than we did as managers or senior directors. And so that's what the book is about.
I'll look forward to that one too. All right, your website is janetpolach.com, Polach. Is that how people can get a hold of you, and what will they find there?
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful.
And let's see, any final thoughts for us today?
Well, thank you, Stephen, so much for the time. I really appreciate it. And, if you're stuck in your own leadership capabilities, or if you would like to further develop the capabilities of some of your managers as they aspire into broader roles, I hope you'll give me a call.
All right, excellent. Janet, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights and some of the ideas and things that you have in your book. And thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. I know the listeners will get some value out of this. So thank you so much.
It was a delight. Thanks, Stephen.
You bet. And for you and for all of our listeners, everyone, have an awesome day. Thanks for joining us today. For more information about our podcasts and speakers, and for additional educational resources, connect with us at awesomeattitude.net. Until next time, be you and be awesome.